Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass sits down for an interview. It turns into a disaster because she refuses to accept responsibility for the Los Angeles wildfires. Also, new polling continues to show that there's bad news for the Democrats on the horizon. We're going to get to both of these stories and more in this video, but let's hear what Mayor Karen Bass had to say.
I'm going to go to Ghana, which I know you've said was a mistake now, but I just am curious on the thought process behind it,
right.
Because we know that there was warnings about the weather before you went, and you still went. What was the thought process behind going to Ghana?
So let me just tell you a couple of things. First of all, when the White House called and asked me if I would represent the president, I said yes. It was going to be a very, very short trip, over a weekend and 2 business days. We need to look at everything about the preparation and all of that for the fires, because I think when we evaluate that, we will find that although there were warnings that I frankly wasn't aware of, although there were warnings, I think our preparation wasn't what it typically is, meaning that before there's a major weather event, for example, last week when we knew we were going to get into the rains, you saw us come together and us talk about, get your sandbags, bring the K-rails out. That type of preparation didn't happen. If that had, I will tell you, Alex, I wouldn't have even gone to San Diego, let alone leave the country.
Now, let me just prepare you for what this interview was really all about. Number one, she refused to take any type of responsibility. There was no apologies. Number two, it seems to me that she was pointing the finger at the fire chief. And number three, it's almost as if she's throwing her team under the bus because she was never made aware of the dangers as it pertains to this, or to actually both of those fires, Eden and the Palisades. So I find her sitting down and doing this interview like we've continued to see from Democrats across the nation. They are just out of touch. They don't understand messaging. They don't understand how to relate to just the average American. This is a bad look, in my opinion.
But what do you mean there were warnings you weren't aware of? Because I know we were talking about it on the news. A lot of people were talking about the problems, warning that this was going to be a huge deal.
So when I talked about it with the fire chief, what she said is that we have warnings of Santa Ana winds a lot, but predicting this, and you saw, from the city, from the county, that level of preparation really didn't happen. So it didn't reach that level to me to say something terrible could happen and maybe you shouldn't have gone on the trip.
Well, if that's the excuse she's going to run with without taking any responsibility, of course, that type of information never really reached her level, then that just proves that, number one, she's a terrible leader. Number two, she's throwing her team under the bus. And number three, she doesn't really know what's going on. And that's bad as the mayor of Los Angeles, okay? Now, what I find interesting is the timeline. Let's go back through that again. January 3rd, National Weather Service puts out a fire weather warning. So it's not like she didn't know that there was a warning that a fire would break out. January 4th, she leaves for Ghana. January 5th, nothing. January 6th, another warning was issued by the National Weather Service. I mean, right there on January 6th, she should have been like, you know what, I'm going to have to go back just in case. I'd rather be safe than sorry. January 7th, the fire breaks out, clearly accelerates because there was no preparation. And January 8th, she finally returns. And here is what Justine Bateman had to say. What the heck? Karen Bass just confessed that she is completely detached from her own job, that she does what she's told by the DNC, we suppose, and that she has no thoughts of her own. Nonetheless, Karen Bass is wholly responsible for the lack of fire preparation of Los Angeles last month. That's the job. And then, of course, because of the internet, it clearly debunks what she said, because on January 6th, her office put this post up. There is an expected destructive and potentially life-threatening windstorm starting Tuesday morning through Wednesday afternoon. Red flag, no parking restrictions will go into effect in certain areas tomorrow morning. Stay safe, LA. I mean, she's responding to the National Weather Service announcement right there. It says it right there, with isolated gusts up to 80 to 100 miles per hour in the mountains and foothills. So she can't say she wasn't aware unless she's absolutely admitting that she does not talk to her team.
Why didn't it
But to me, I don't know. I mean, I think that that's one of the things we need to look at. So 2 investigations are taking place. One internal to the city, and that's the Fire Commission, because that's mandated by the city charter. So the commission will hire an outside entity to examine everything, the pre-deployment, why were firefighters sent home, all of that should have taken place that didn't. And then also the governor has contracted with the Fire Safety Research Institute, which is a national institute that investigated what happened in the fires in Maui. So everything that happened, including that, needs to be examined. But I will tell you that I felt absolutely terrible not being here for my city and not being here for my family, who was impacted by the fires as well. And so when I say it was a mistake, absolutely, the idea that I was not present was very painful.
Yeah, so whoever's running her PR, they need to be fired, because she just stated something that no one wants to hear. You're telling me that the firm that was in charge of the Maui fire will now be in charge of investigating what happened with this fire? I mean, are we stupid? It's like insanity with these people. They keep doing things that are not going to get the results that people are really looking for. The results that we're really looking for is she needs to resign like yesterday. Same thing with Governor Gavin Newsom. He needs to go. And they absolutely need to bring in leadership that is going to put the safety of people first, not their social justice beliefs, because that's what's happened during her tenure. That's just the bottom line.
What does accountability look like to you? And is it time that somebody be fired for this?
Well, again, I think it's premature to say now, but I do think that we have to examine everything, and that is going to take place very soon.
How do you assess the job performance of the chief of the fire department?
Well, I think that that's something that has to be assessed. I need to understand why things were handled differently this time than they've been handled before.
And why do you think that is?
I'm not sure.
The mayor told me she's committed to running for re-election in 2026 and winning over her critics.
And they don't have faith that you can lead the city right now.
Well, you know
what do you
what?
say to those? What do you say to those critics?
It is my responsibility to disprove that.
Yeah.
It is my responsibility to prove that I can lead, and I am, the rebuilding and the recovery process.
Now, one of the most noble things a leader can do is fall on their sword. And I think she refuses to do that. And I think that's a habit from the Democratic Party. They're allergic to accountability. They never will come out and say, hey, it's me. I messed up. I am wrong. They won't say that. They will always suggest that it was that person or that process or that procedure over there. And by the way, bottom line here, why do we need an investigation to know that it's your fault? We're not stupid here. We don't need 1,000 people to tell us what went wrong. We know what went wrong. Okay, so this takes us to the next story in regards to what's going wrong, and that's the Democrats continuing to blame President Trump for that Toronto plane crash, which is absolutely disgraceful. Also, I'm going to show you this little interview of a federal worker that is demanding your sympathy because she got fired. Now, before we get to that, let's hear what Chuck Schumer had to say this morning about Trump.
The FAA. The more Donald Trump and DOJ indiscriminately hack away at public agencies, the greater harm to Americans' well-being and even their safety. The FAA is a good example. Just weeks after the deadliest plane crash in a long time, and just as we see more incidents around the country, President Trump has fired hundreds of FAA workers, including air safety personnel. Firing people whose very job it is to keep air travel safe is nothing short of reckless. Now, the White House accused us of linking the crash of the Minneapolis flight directly with FAA cuts in staffing. Nothing could be further from the truth. I simply said that when there are fewer FAA personnel, the skies are less safe. Does Donald Trump deny that there are fewer FAA staffers? Does Donald Trump deny that when he fires FAA workers, including workers who focus on safety, it makes travel less safe? Of course, Donald Trump is obfuscating once again. He doesn't want the truth to come out. But he should correct course immediately and halt these firings, because the safety of the skies is at risk.
Now, what's fascinating about all this, and you guys have heard me say this for the last few days, there's really no direct link between these FAA cuts and what happened in Toronto, given the fact that it happened in Toronto's airspace at a Toronto airport, which is obviously owned by the country of Canada. And I'm not saying that to insult your intelligence, but again, these people in Congress and definitely in the media, I guess they don't get the memo in regards to that, because this morning a CBS host by the name of Gayle King, she even gets a reality check from the CEO of Delta, who absolutely defends the cuts at the FAA. Hear it for yourself.
The Trump administration recently fired many employees of the FAA administration. Do those cuts worry you, and do you think that impacts the safety? I know you just said it's the safest way to travel, but after looking at all these mishaps, a lot of people are very nervous. Do these cuts affect you?
The cuts do not affect us, Gail. I've been in close communication with the Secretary of Transportation. I understand that the cuts at this time are something that are raising questions, but the reality is there's over 50,000 people that work at the FAA, and the cuts, I understand, were 300 people, and they were in non-critical safety functions. The Trump administration has committed to investing deeply in terms of improving the overall technologies that are used in the air traffic control systems and modernizing the skies. They've committed to hiring additional controllers and investigators and safety investigators. So no, I'm not concerned with that at all.
Now, let's understand something about Delta Airlines. They've been caught doing woke stuff as well. They have stayed committed to DEI policies. And so for the CEO to come out and actually vindicate President Trump on this just shows you how off base the media really is. This also touches on why, actually CNN is reporting this morning, why more people are now identifying as Republican versus Democrat, which is really bad news for the party. And if they continue to do things like this, they're only going to make it worse. Now, before I show you that poll, now let's listen to Dana Bash do the same thing.
This is happening against the backdrop of massive cuts across the federal government, including at the FAA. Just going to put some up on the screen. Hundreds of FAA employees have been laid off as part of Elon Musk going through all the federal agencies. And then beyond the FAA, we have 10% of the CDC workforce, 3,400 at the U.S. Forest Service, 2,200 at the Interior Department, 2,000 at the Department of Energy, 1,000 at the VA. I just want to read what Chuck Schumer, the top Democrat in the Senate, said. I'm thankful that everyone in the flight incident in Toronto that took off from Minneapolis is safe, but we keep seeing these incidents day after day. Meanwhile, Trump's doing massive layoffs at the FAA, including safety specialists, and making our skies less and less safe.
Now, the truth in regards to what makes air travel unsafe is these individuals, the companies, the organizations, the airlines prioritizing social justice movements over safety and competency. It's really that simple. You can't do it all. You got to have priorities. You can't prioritize everything equally. You got to have a number one thing that you say, I'm going to commit 80% of what we do to this right here, and we're going to be the best at it. What these companies and organizations, including the federal agency, that is the FAA, they've been up to over the last 4 years is they're prioritizing social justice. And that's why CNN dropped a poll this morning showing bad news for the Democrat Party. Watch this.
Donald Trump and the Republican Party has changed the electorate. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at party identification, Democrats versus Republicans. You go back to 2017, 5 points more of the electorate was Democrats than Republicans. You go to 2021 when Joe Biden was starting out, look at that, 6 points more of the electorate was Democrats than Republicans. But look at what's happened in February of 2025. Look at this. Republicans, there are more Republicans in the electorate than there are Democrats. Republican +2. So Donald Trump and the Republicans have remade the electorate. They've turned some people over from being Democrats or independents to become Republicans. New folks have entered the electorate who are more Republican leaning. And so when you combine that with the fact that Republicans are really, really behind Donald Trump, all of a sudden you get a winning recipe whereby you break the normal rules of politics and give Donald Trump that positive net approval rating when he had pretty much a consistently negative one in term number one. As I said at the beginning, he's copying Frank Sinatra, doing it my way.
Now, if you're like me, you were probably paying attention to her face or her facial expressions because she looked pretty annoyed at her colleague there because he was telling the truth out loud. I mean, it is bad news for the party. If they don't stop with the hyperbole, if they don't stop with lying about stuff that is just blatantly false, as much as they want to accuse Trump of he's lying, he's over-exaggerating, they're just as guilty, if not more. Listen, it's great news over here. I love it. but I'm sure they don't. Now, the other part of their playbook is to tug on your heartstrings. I think you guys hear me say that all the time. This is CNN bringing on a federal worker who's been fired, hoping, or in my opinion, demanding you have sympathy for them and to join them in their fight against President Trump.
Are you hoping to ever return to a job in the federal government or not after this?
I wouldn't do it until, some things have changed, because right now it's a lack of stability. And then also, the emotional impact to me, this really feels like a betrayal in some sense, and that they didn't consider how this impacts people, and especially the 30% of the federal workforce that have served on active duty.
Tell us more about how it feels like a betrayal.
It comes down to what I've already said. I served my country for 11 years, 9 of them on active duty. I deployed twice. I spent so much time away from my family. I was gone when my mom passed away. And I missed that, to serve my country. And I was excited to continue serving in this capacity. And they not only tore that out from under my feet, but couldn't even just grant me a layoff and instead place the blame on me, that it was my performance. And I've gotten nothing but positive reviews on that. So I feel very much like the message is that my service is valued. They don't care about how this impacts me or people like me. And to me, it's inhumane. It feels like they're ignoring our personhood and not respecting us as human beings or as American citizens.
Now, thank Devory Darkins for giving you the truth in regards to this matter, because if you're emotional, you won't see it. The bottom line is this. There's a difference between when she served in the military and she missed time away from her mother, who ultimately fell ill and then passed away, versus her time as a federal worker. Those are two different situations, two different timelines. That's number one. Number two, she's a disabled veteran who I know is probably getting benefits. So not only was she working for the federal government, but she was collecting a disability check from the VA. Now, that is an amazing position to be in. By all accounts, there should be gratitude in that regard. Number three, it is not the American taxpayer's fault on why there's government fraud, waste, and abuse. And we're in a season where we need to cut the fat. And unfortunately, she falls into that. And she just needs to accept it. It's a part of life. People get fired every single day. What makes you so special?
I'm so sorry you had to miss that with your mom. I've lost my mom, and to not be there at the bedside is just, I'm so sorry. And you were serving your country at the time, and you said you were proud of that, and now you feel betrayed. Chelsea Milburn, thank you for coming on and sharing your story. I think it's really important to understand the human side of all of this rather than just talking about it. So thank you for helping us better understand that. We'll be right back.
Thank you so much for letting me tell my story.
Yeah, I agree. It is important to talk about the human side. And the human side is millions of Americans have been, in my opinion, getting raped for their tax dollars. And we don't know where it's going. And as a result, a huge federal bureaucracy has continued to grow, and they're not doing anything that's in the best interest of everyday Americans. So quite frankly, I don't have any sympathy. I don't feel bad. I lost my mother too in high school. It's unfortunate. But going onto the news and trying to use that in an effort to push this narrative that what President Trump and Doge is doing is evil, I think that is very disingenuous, and I find that to be disrespectful. Now, she wasn't the only one demanding sympathy. Here is the other protest that happened today in front of HHS. Watch this.
And I got a message for Donald Trump. You swore an oath to the Constitution, and you are not upholding that oath. The things that he is doing are blatantly illegal. He knows it. He admits it. Under Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution, he must faithfully execute the laws of this country, and he is not doing it. And I don't care who you are or who you voted for, you should be furious about that. Yeah! And I got a message for Congress, too. What are you doing about it? Look at what we've seen. Look at the violations of the law and the Constitution, and we don't have one hearing. How cutlass is this Congress. This can't continue. This cannot continue.
So by him saying this cannot continue, is he calling for the executive branch to be censored or to be prevented from exercising its power? Because what Trump is doing is definitely within his authority. I mean, we just had judges that ruled over the weekend and yesterday in favor of Elon Musk and Doge and their ability to access government systems. So, again, this type of rhetoric is only going to continue to destroy whatever is left of the Democrat Party. You just saw the poll earlier. And I just, for the life of me, don't understand why they don't see that. Now, I'm not complaining that they don't see it. I'm just pointing out that it's obvious that they don't see it or they refuse to. Now, here's Jim Jordan responding to these protests and this entire movement to persecute President Trump, Elon Musk, and Doge.
Democrats for now, 2 weeks have been saying instead of stopping the stupid spending, they attack the guy who's exposing the stupid spending. I think we should maybe get rid of the stupid spending. Trans comic opera in Ireland, Sesame Street on Iraqi television. I think maybe we should focus on that. No. Can't do that. And I think this just underscores the fundamental difference between the left and those of us in the Republican Party, those of us conservatives. The left thinks the bureaucrats are smarter than we the people. Got to trust the bureaucracy. Got to trust it. You got to trust the experts in the government. I'd rather trust the people. The 77 million people who elected President Trump, who told us he was systematically going to go through these agencies and identify dumb things where taxpayer money is going to. He told us he was going to do it. The American people understood it. He got elected. Now he's carrying out that mission, and they're attacking the guy who's President Trump has put in charge of this effort.
And that's why it just doesn't make sense that the Democrats are fighting this, right? They're fighting a losing battle. This is the American people. They want to know what happened to their tax dollars. But you know what Democrats say in response? They believe that American people are not educated enough to be able to fight against this. They blame it on the lack of education, meaning they're calling American citizens ignorant because they refuse to protest what Doge is doing. And of course, I do have a clip to show you that supports what I just said. Here's Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett saying just that on The View.
He right now has a 53% approval rating. It's higher than it's ever been. 70% believe that he's fulfilling his promises, and 45% believe Democrats should be more moderate. What do you take away? I think there's a lot to make of those numbers, but what's your takeaway from that?
My takeaway is just like the election. We've got to do better at education. People don't understand, but you will understand when those hospitals in rural America start closing down even more. You will understand when you don't have your Social Security. You will understand when your Medicaid, your Medicare goes away. You will understand as planes continue to fall out of the sky. Soon you will understand why it's important to maybe have somebody that isn't loud and ridiculous, and maybe Sleepy Joe is what we wanted because we could at least sleep at night.
Well, clearly she doesn't understand, because if you're going to make the claim that maybe it's good for us to go back to what happened under Joe Biden, then I don't see the Democrats ever winning again. You know, it's just sad that this is continuing to be pushed from the left. They're not willing to find common ground. Again, it's a losing battle, which brings me to the question of this video. Do you believe that federal workers should get special treatment, more benefits, more protection than workers in the private sector? Because apparently that's what the media believes, that these individuals should not be fired, that they should continue to maintain their job. And just because they worked 15 years in their career in the federal government, that they are not allowed, that President Trump is not allowed to fire them. Let me know what your thoughts are about all that in the comments section below. Now, one thing that is good news for Republicans is that Democrat donors have finally had enough with Democrats. Yes, they have cut off funding. They are no longer opening up their checkbook until they fix the disaster leadership that is continuing to run the party into the ground. That is breaking news from yesterday. And if you missed out on that story and more, all you have to do is click on it because it's coming up right now.